All right, let's just go through a bunch more examples to really make sure this is all solidified in our heads. And before we launch into them, I just want to go through a useful trick to get common denominators that works sometimes. All right, the lowest common denominator, the LCD, can often, but not always, be found by multiplying the denominators. So what exactly does that mean? Well, let's launch into this question right here. Here we have 4 on 7 and 3 on 4. So it's hard to figure out which of these is bigger because, the numerators are different and the denominators are different. So it's hard to figure out which of these is bigger. So what we want to do is we want to create two equivalent fractions with the same denominator. And this little trick here is telling me that all I have to do is to multiply the denominators, which means, because I've got a 4 in my denominator over here, let's multiply this side by 4. And because I've got a 7 in my denominator over here, let's multiply this side by 7. And now I can go 4 4s are 16. Oh, and actually I'll do this in blue. I'm going to go 4 4s are 16, 4 7s are 28, and then over here 3 7s are 21, and 4 7s are 28. All right, now looking at these, which one is bigger? Well, 28 is the same, so that means we're just looking at the bigger numerator. So the bigger numerator is 21 here, so that means 21 on 28 is bigger than 16 on 28. So that means 3/4 is bigger than 4 on 7. Now, the reason why this little trick here worked is because the lowest common multiple of 4 and 7 is 28. And, in some cases, not all cases, if you just multiply numbers together, you get the lowest common multiple. Now, that does not always work. But what I want to show you when we come to the next example here is that when you're trying to figure out which is the bigger fraction, it actually doesn't matter if you find the lowest common denominator or not. So let's jump over to this one, and we're going to use this same technique here. All right, so here I've got 1/2 and 5 on 24. So what happens if I just say, all right, let's take this 24 and multiply this side by 24. So that's the top and the bottom. Now this one's 2. Let's multiply this by 2 and this by 2. All right, if I do that, what am I going to end up with? I'm going to end up with 24 on 48. And over here, I'm going to end up with 10 on 48. I can compare these fractions very easily because they've got the same denominator, 48 and 48. Now, 48 is not the lowest common denominator of 2 and 24, but it really doesn't matter. Because they're both the same, I can still compare. It's quite clear that 24 on 48 is bigger than 10 on 48 because the numerator over here is bigger. So just like that, we can say 1/2 is bigger than 5 on 24. They don't have to be the same. It doesn't have to be the lowest common denominator in order to compare. As long as the denominators are the same, you're fine. Now, if we were to think about this, let's come over here. Let me just rewrite this again. And this would be useful for you to do as well. Let's go 1/2 and 5 on 24. And let's think for a moment, what is my lowest common denominator of 2 and 24? What's my lowest common denominator of 2 and 24? Hopefully you can immediately tell me it's going to be 24, which means all we actually need to do is multiply, and let me grab that red again. All we need to do is multiply this side by 12. And now what we're going to end up with is, all right, 12 times 1 is 12. 12 times 2 is 24. And then this side, you don't have to do anything to this side. And just like that, we've got the same denominators. So that's the lowest common denominator. So it's easier to work with the lowest common denominator because now you got 12 on 24 and 5 on 24. And it's quite clear that 12 on 24 is going to be bigger because you've got a bigger numerator. So that means 1/2 is bigger than 5 on 24. But the thing that you really need to appreciate here is it actually does not matter if you've got the lowest common denominator or not. Because as long as the denominators are the same, you're going to be fine. So this trick always works, but it doesn't always find the lowest common denominator. So that's why it says it doesn't always work, because it doesn't always find the lowest common denominator, but it is always going to find a common denominator. And as long as you've got a common denominator, you're fine. So that's really the background story there. So it's really important that you just get a sense for these fractions, and that's why I'm spending a bit of time talking about this case here, because it does come up a lot. All right, you might like to pause the video and just see if you can do these last ones. All right, so to do these last ones, I've got 21 and 7. Well, I can make this 7 into 21 just by multiplying this by 3, which means I have to multiply the top by 3. Whatever you do to the top, you must do to the bottom. So that means I'm going to end up with 2 on 21. I'm not even changing this side. And this side's going to be 3 3s are 9 and 7 3s are 21. So that means this one is bigger. Then we'll go on to the next one. Here I've got 2 on 3 and 3 on 4. I'm going to have to multiply both sides here. So my lowest common denominator of 3 and 4 is 12. So that means I'm going to have to multiply this side by 3. I'm going to have to multiply this side by 4. So this is going to be 8 on 12. And this is going to be 9 on 12. And then, this one's going to be bigger because a 9 is bigger than an 8. That's bigger. Oh, I messed up my colors. Oh, my colors are all messed up, but hopefully you can still figure that out. All right. That's how you do that, people. Hopefully that makes sense and you feel comfortable with creating, equivalent fractions to compare the size of fractions. All right, I'll see you.